Good morning. Ayin Beis, Volume 3. We're at the end of Ayin Beis, but as I laid out yesterday, we're going to now learn the sources where the Rebbe Rashab based a big part of this section of Ayin Beis to be able to reconstruct the picture and answer questions that the Rebbe Rashab himself asked and never explicitly answered. So the first way, so we laid that out in detail yesterday, all the unfinished pieces, so to speak. First place we'll begin with is the last question, and we'll work our way backwards. And a lot of things will become clear as we learn these Maimorim. So what we're going to do today is go back to the question on page 1466. If you want, you can look at that page, which began the whole discussion of the two of Yichud, the two levels of Yichud Tata, Yichud Elah, which is both Shema and Baruch Shem, but more specifically Hashem Elokeinu and Hashem Echad and Shema itself. And that is coming to answer the question, how is it possible to effect bittul the nefesh habamis? Which isn't a small question, because in many ways that is, in the language of Aveda, the theme of Ayin Beis. How do you create an interface between existence and God? The question really is, on a deeper level, when you think about that, how do you create an interface between the yesh of a nefesh habamis, who's betekef hayesh is the nega hepech habitl legamri? It's not neutral. It's one thing to say connecting God and existence. Okay, but existence, especially the animal soul, is not neutral. It's very much defined by its own ego and its egocentric life, meaning one of self-interest. Take a vayeshes about me. I mean, Tanya explains it in very specific detail what the nefesh habamis is like. It's about its own survival. Exactly the driving force of every human being on earth is my own needs. And you want that to be not just neutralized, but turned into B'haftas Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha b'shnei yitzarecha, to love God. So it's like changing, essentially, basically, you meet somebody who's completely consumed with their own materialistic needs, money, power, pleasure, and so on. And that person is going to now become someone that's going to be longing for and connecting to and loving God. If you could do that, if you have a formula for that, you have a formula for transforming this world. That's called Mashiach. If every person on earth can be taught how to do that, we have all our problems solved. So this isn't a small issue. This question is both relevant individually and also collectively. And that is a question that remained unanswered, at least explicitly, in Ayin Beis. To answer it, he said we need to understand the yichud of existence with God, and both yichud tata, yesh, the ayin of the yesh anivra, the divine as it relates to existence, the divine that's beyond existence, and then the yichud of those two yichudim, those two unifications. And that will then in turn help us understand. So clearly, that hisbonenus, that understanding of unity, is going to in some way tame and ultimately transform the animal soul. That's what we need to understand why and how. And as I said, the Rebbe Rashab never went back to that. Again, not explicitly. Okay, it's implicit and so on. But I say thank you again to the Alter Rebbe, and the Mittler Rebbe did leave us these Maimorim. The Rebbe Rashab referred to these the Maimer back on page 1352. If you want to look inside, I'll just quote the actual lines, so to show that what I'm going to learn now is grounded in a Maimer that the Rebbe Rashab, not that I need justification, I mean these are Maimorim Chassidus, but he said, "Commercial Kosev calls there." The end of the paragraph, first paragraph on page 1352, Ba'erech, like all this is written about at length in Torah Ohr b'dibra Mik Hashem Elokeinu hamagbi. So what we're going to do now is learn that very Maimer. inside. We already actually learned a piece of it. You may recall. I learned inside just like a small paragraph from there. So we're going to learn it now entirely. And then there's the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer that explains that Maimer. And that will help us answer this question about the Nefesh Habamis, and then also answer the question about Ner Mitzvah. What does Ner Mitzvah mean? And the three things within the mitzvah. And actually also help us understand Torah Ohr and some of the other things that we laid out yesterday. But one thing at a time. So I will serve as the captain here, the referee, to make sure that when we're learning Torah Ohr, we're not just learning it, we're learning it, even though it's worth learning on its own, but we're learning it in the context of Ayin Beis. So that's why I wanted to ground it exactly what we're going to be learning here. So again, to understand that, yesh lahagdim tchila inyan hakrishma. That's the Rebbe Rashab's words on 1466. So now we shall.
Which Maimer and Torah Ohr is this?
Didn't I just read the exact words? And I've said it maybe 100 times. Not sure why, but okay. So if you go back to 1352, he says, Torah Ohr dibra maslu mika Hashem Elokeinu hamagbi l'sheves. And as I pointed out a number of times, it's a Chanukah Maimer. It's already posted on our group, probably more than once. And I've referred to it at least 100 times. I don't mind repeating myself, but I'm just pointing out it's not the first time that I'm discussing it. Okay. So if you want to follow along the Maimer, it's on the group. I don't know if you posted it again. You want to do that, you can. If you don't want to follow along, it's also fine. I can teach it straight. I'm going to teach it straight from the Maimer. Now, as I said, while we learn this Maimer, I will continuously keep referring back to Ayin Beis to make sure that the Maimer is being understood in that context. So the key operative question right now is a few things, but mainly this transformation of the animal soul. And in the process, we're going to be learning what the Neshama's role in doing that is. The Neshama does that. Nefesh Elikis is educating the Nefesh Habamis, obviously. And the role of mitzvahs in helping this process along, and the role of Torah. So we have Ner Hashem. Ner is a flame of the Neshama. The Psila is the Nefesh Elikis as it manifests inside the body. And we've learned about that extensively as well, how the Neshama is affected, Mimikre Haguf, from the experiences of the body. But in turn, the Neshama, the Psila, is the divine soul within the body. The Shemen is the Chachma, the wisdom. Shemen is wisdom of the animal soul. And the goal is to take that wisdom, and instead of it being directed toward the animal soul's personal interest, self-interest, that it becomes Shemen, it becomes fuel and oil to fuel the love of the divine soul, to create a divine light and a divine love. And so that is the fire, the flame, the light that it creates. So it's the neshama, the Ner Neshama, that is the flame of the neshama, that is using the animal soul, directing it toward creating a divine flame, a divine love, a divine light. But there's also Ner Mitzvah and Torah Ohr, the role of Mitzvah and Torah Ohr. So that's also part of this discussion. So with that said, that's what we're going to learn now. The Maimers in Torah Ohr, as I said, Chanukah Maimer. The page is
I just reposted it.
I'm sorry? You just posted it?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, good. Okay. Good. So the Maimon is Mika Hashem Elokeinu Magbil Shavis Hamashpili Lides B'Shamayim B'Ba'aretz. That pasuk is going to come into play as we learn further in the Maimer. And the page is Lamed Ches Beis 38b. This mimer, just for the record, as I pointed out in the past, was said by the Alter Rebbe, Chanukah Tov Kuf Samach Vav. I want to just make sure that that is correct. I'm almost sure that's the case. Yeah. The second, please. Yeah. Actually, I said Tavkuf Samach Vav, Tavkuf Samach Zayin. Sorry. In Liadi, the Alter Rebbe said this mime in Liadi, Chanukah Tavkuf Samach Zayin, which would be the equivalent of Samach 1806. Sorry, 1806. The Alter Rebbe would pass away in 1812. So this is 6 years before that. Samach Zayin. Yeah. So we're going to learn inside, and as I said, I'll keep the connection going all the time. So he says like this: Inexiv. It says, "Kiner mitzvah v'Torah Ohr." Right away, it begins with this pasuk. Ner mitzvah. Mitzvah is a candle, and Torah is compared to light. Hari shehim shel hakosav es mitzvah l'ner. So what does we know from this? That the verse compares and gives a mashal for a mitzvah. The mashal is a ner, a flame or candle. Now another verse says, "Uksiv Ner Nishmas Odom." Ner Havaya, the flame of God, the candle of God, is the soul of a human being. So now we see another thing that's compared to ner is the soul. As I said on page 1350 and 1352, the Rebbe Rashab actually quoted this Torah Ohr. Okay. We need to understand. Ma'u inyan haner shel mitzvah or ma haner shel neshama. Since the verse uses ner on two separate things, mitzvah and neshama, and a mitzvah is not as a neshama, and a neshama is not a mitzvah. That's the soul, this is a mitzvah. So we have to understand what is the inyan of the ner of mitzvah, and what is the inyan of ner of neshama. In other words, what's the difference of these candles and these flames? So the Alter Rebbe now says, V'hinei, so now he dissects the ner. To understand that, we have to understand what is a ner. What is this mashal adding? What is the pasuk coming to tell us even? Why do we need to know that a neshama is compared to, that a mitzvah is compared to a candle, and a neshama is compared to a candle? So he says we have to analyze what is a ner. In a neru shekori al Shema psila. A ner, in general, is something that's named after the wick. So that's in halacha. You say a ner, what defines a candle, even though it does have two other elements, the fuel, the oil, and the fire, but it's nikore al shema psila kihi ikra ner. It's the wick that is the primary function of the ner that turns it into a candle. Because oil exists on its own. A fire you can light in many ways. So what defines a candle? A candle is that you're combining the oil that will travel through the wick that will produce the flame of a candle. So even though the ikr is the psila, however, ein ner b'lo shemen. However, there is no such thing as a candle without oil, without fuel. Shashemen hu agreidim liyas adlokas haner. The shemen is what causes there to be the igniting, the kindling, and the light, the ner, the flame should light. Benachas, in a calm fashion. In other words, if you took a wick, even a thick wick, and you lit it, even if it burned for a few minutes, but it would not be a balanced type of burning. When you look at a candle, we're talking now candle, well, you could also say a candle made out of wax, but candles like in the Beis Hamikdash, or what we use for Chanukah, mean, you could use a candle, a physical candle made out of wax or paraffin or whatever. We're talking about, think of oil inside of a container, a wick on top that you light. What makes it distinguished than any fire that you just light? So a fire that you light, if something is flammable, it'll burn. But with oil, it burns calmly. The oil sits there quietly, slowly being fed into the wick. The wick absorbs the oil in a very balanced way, and it burns in a very menachas. The right translation is calm. You can say tranquil. You could say not volatile. A very peaceful and very seamless way. That will allow that this flame will remain and burn for a certain amount of time. As I said, any other type of igniting will burn out quickly or won't burn as long. Here you can have something burning for hours in this very peaceful so-called way. So it creates a very stable type of flame. The Ilule Hashemen. So therefore, even though a ner is named after the wick, but there's no such thing. A wick without oil will burn out very quickly. If you want it to really burn properly, you need the oil. The Iluli Hashemen hoyedelik maher ubemerutza, and without the oil, it would burn quickly. And merutza means very aggressively. Merutza means very rushed. Merutza is a little different than Maya. Maya means fast, and merutza means running, like very, almost not forced merutza. Too much drive. Here, it's lit, but it does it very slowly and very deliberately. V'hainu, this means that and how is this achieved? Because the shemen is being drawn and following the psila. In other words, take away the wick, you also don't have any fire. You have fuel. The wick is like drawing. Think of it like a pipe that's drawing, and the oil is following the wick. So even though you don't see it physically with the eye, but you can look closely. Let's say the wick is made out of cotton or out of any other material. So the wick is perfectly conducive to being drawing, that the oil is being fed into that wick, and that's how it burns. You see the Rebbe, the classic Chassidus Chabad, Mepsari Echza Lakah, that for my flesh I behold God, that dissecting an example, and here's just the pasuk says the word Ner, helps us understand a whole concept in godliness that we would not understand without using this example of the Ner. So that's the Alter Rebbe is dissecting the very anatomy of how a candle works. Obviously, all this is going to be relevant to the nimshal, the moral that we learn from this in our Avodah. But every detail is relevant here. Then he continues. And now this oil gets burned and consumed. Nichla from the word consumed or absorbed. In the flame that is holding on to, that is burning from the wick, until it runs out completely. Because remember, we're talking about a limited amount of fuel, but ultimately, even though it's burning slowly and calmly and peacefully is also a good word here, peacefully, till it completely gets, till it runs out completely, and none of the oil will remain at all, because in time, it completely becomes absorbed and elevated in the ash and the fire. In other words, it fed the wick that burned the fire, and ultimately that will completely consume all the oil. But if that happens, it doesn't happen in a second. It happens over time. And all this, as I said, will soon be understood in Aveda. U'makom mokim. On the other hand, what happens with the wick? Hapsilo hu ikra ner. Like he said at the outset, the psila is still the primary aspect, the primary ingredient, the primary element in the candle that really makes everything work. Again, they're all necessary, You can't have a wick without the flame, without the oil, and you need the oil and you want the flame. But it's ikra ner. Because the burning fire, who is through it being grasped, being contained, being controlled. Nechas contained is the right word, grasped or contained the psila in the wick. The ilu hoya nitva b'shemen. And if the flame, the light, would be consumed, would be nitva means submerged, like something is submerged in the shemen, it would burn out. In other words, if there was no wick to separate between the two, what would happen? You could technically light oil. Oil can burn. I don't know if you've ever seen the experiments where you could have the top of the oil will burn, but it's going to burn out very quickly. The psila becomes like the interface that connects the flame with the fuel, the oil. So the oil runs through the psila, through the wick, and that's how it burns properly. When the oil follows and is drawn to the wick, which in turn causes the fire to burn properly, like we learned. So that's the moshel of Ner. Now he's going to explain what that means in the context of Ner Hashem Nishmas Odom, in the context of a neshama. Now, what we learn now shouldn't be new at all to you, because more or less this was said on page 1350, 1351, 1352. The Rebbe Rashab reviewed this. But we're learning it now in the original mimer of the Alter Rebbe, which he did not write. He delivered, like I said, Chanukah Tov Kov Samach Zayin. It was written by his brother Mariel, Rabbi Yehuda Leib. Okay. But just in case, if anybody wants to ask anything, everything clear? So now we'll go to the Nimshal. Any questions? Okay. Ulahavan Moshel Zeh, Benimshal, Bener Mitzvah, Bener Havaya, Nishmas Odom. To understand how does this Moshel now work in the Nimshal, in the moral. Since you spoke about all these aspects with the candle of the mitzvah and the candle of the neshama. So the first is the Alter Rebbe is going to begin with the Ner Neshama. Ner Mitzvah is going to talk about later. So here's how it works. To understand this Tzarech Lahagdim, we need to preface Inyan V'Hafta. You recognize that, right? Because that's how we got to the Torah in the first place. That the whole idea of transforming the animal soul is due to the fact of V'Hafta Hashem Elokecha. So he's going to now go to V'Hafta. We have to understand V'Hafta B'chol Avavcha. So the full verse of V'Hafta Hashem Elokecha B'chol Avavcha B'chol Nafshecha B'chol Meidecha. Here the focus is on B'chol Avavcha. So the Gemara says, why does it say Lipcha with one base? Because it's referring to two chambers of the heart. The base is both sides of the heart. That the love of God has to be with both parts of a personation.
Am I the only one who doesn't have a good signal? Because you're breaking up, Rabbi. Maybe it's me. I don't know. I don't think so. But can anyone else?
I can hear him fine.
And you'll recognize.
Yeah,
I did get a message before that it's unstable.
Breaking up.
Breaking up. Tell me if it gets better.
It kind of just got better, but let's keep going, and we'll tell you with some time. Mr. Schneider reports that she's not hearing you well either.
Okay, so keep me posted.
So far, so good.
Okay, so it says now, seemingly not understood. And here you'll see the question of the way the Alter Rebbe phrased it in comparison to how the Rebbe Rashab phrased it. Eich yishuv haYetzer Hara la'avos havaya aydei Odom. How will the Yetzer Hara respond and turn? Yishuv, you could say the Yetzer Hara turn. How will it turn to love God through the person of Aloyla Yishmael love? The Yetzer Hara is busy with its own interests. So we say that's a nice statement and that's the goal. But what's the process? How can you achieve that when we know the Yetzer Hara is not interested? The Yetzer Tov, the Nefesh Alikis, is divine in nature, so it obviously naturally gravitates to godliness. But how will the Yetzer Hara turn to love God through the person? Aloyla Yishmael won't listen to it. So if you think about it, this is exactly the Rebbe Rashab's question. The Rebbe Rashab put it more pointedly by saying, but essentially it's the same question. Like the Rebbe Rashab just adds the fact that it's a yesh. But that's what the Alter Rebbe is essentially asking. We shall learn how the Mittler Rebbe phrases it as well. So you see, this is the operative question I mentioned before in the beginning of this class. Central question to all of this is the key to everything. An animal soul is busy with its own needs, the Yetzer Hara. How exactly are you going to cause it to love God? So the Pasuk makes the statement and says it's a mitzvah that you should love God with both sides of your heart. But how? Similar like the Alter Rebbe's on the Sharblat cover page of Tanya. So Moshe Rabbeinu said, and the Alter Rebbe says that Sefer Tanya is based on that pasuk, Levayat Hativ, to explain well, Eichu Karev, how? So there's the what and there's the how. So we're now going to talk about the how. Inyan Hu, the answer to this is, like I explained a number of times, Chassidus doesn't say the teretz. This is the answer. It says Acha Inyan. It explains the whole subject matter. It's an Inyan. By understanding the whole Inyan, automatically the question will be answered. So what's the Inyan? Kihine bir Inyan Yetzer Tevi Yetzer Harahu. The explanation, what exactly is the Yetzer Tevi and Yetzer Hara? So we need now to dissect that. So he's now going to dissect the Yetzer Tevi and the Yetzer Hara, their personalities, if you wish, their chemistry, their anatomy. As it's known, every person has two souls. It's like straight from Tanya speaks about that, of course. Nefesh alikis, v'nefesh habamis. Divine soul and animal soul. V'kol nefesh mischalekes l'shnayim. And each of these two souls, in turn, breaks down into two parts. The faculties of these souls. And what are they? Shehem seichel u'midas. The cognitive faculties, intelligence, seichel, and midas, the emotional faculties. So now we have the two nefashos, each has seichel and midas. V'hine ikar nefesh hu seichel. The primary force that works in a nefesh is seichel, because that's what makes a human being unique. Intelligence, the intelligent creature. Yes, we have midas, and it's a powerful force in our lives. But the ikar, he says, is the seichel. But it's a very different seichel in the nefesh alikis and nefesh habamis. What is the mind of the divine soul involvement? And what is the mind of the animal soul involved? That's what he's going to discuss now. Ki nefesh alikis ikra hi nefesh hamaskeles. The primary function of the divine soul is a nefesh hamaskeles, is a soul, is the intelligent soul. The nefesh that as it conceives, beinenes, and contemplates. That's like chachma and bina. Tamid, umaseges be'erein sei baruch hu. Its mind is preoccupied all the time in understanding erein sei baruch hu. What else does a divine soul have interest in? It's not interested in materialism, not interested in the physical matters. Its constant focus is the divine, understanding and appreciating Ein Sof Baruch Hu. Ve'ein lo haskola acheres. It doesn't have anything else that it's interested in, its mind is interested in. That's what it's completely focused on. Due to its personality. It's simply because it's a divine entity. The divine entity is interested in the divine, it's not interested in other things. What about the midas of the nefesh halikis? It's the second part. V'amidis ava v'yira haneldus min ha'seichel v'asogazu hein ha'nikrois b'shem yetzer tev. And the midas, the emotions of love and reverence that are born and are birthed from this intelligence. So when a seichel is contemplating on godliness, it in turn awakens and gives birth to midas, and that's what's called the Yetzer Tev. So in other words, nefesh halikis is the whole nefesh, the seichel and the midas. The Yetzer Tev is the emotions of the nefesh halikis. This answers a question a lot of people ask: what's the difference between nefesh halikis, nefesh habamis, Yetzer Tev, and Yetzer Hara? They usually are seen as synonymous, but it's actually more to break it down. The Yetzer Tev, Yetzer means in the heart, the right side of the heart. Yetzer is the stat side of good, where the divine soul resides, but it's not addressing the mind. So basically, the nefesh halikis is the chabad and the midas of the seichel and the midas of nefesh halikis. Yetzer Tev is referring to the midas. The same thing with the Yetzer Hara. The seichel of nefesh habamis and the Yetzer Hara is the midas of the nefesh haba, as we'll learn shortly. Okay. Now, how does it work with the nefesh habamis now? So it also has seichel and midas. V'chein ikar nefesh habamis hi hamaskelos u'maseges begashmis elam hazeh v'chumri yusod. So just like the nefesh halikis has a mind, and its primary role is that mind to focus on godliness, transcendence, the primary nefesh habamis conceives and contemplates on gashmis elam hazeh hachumrius. Its mind is focused on the physical reality and its crassness, its coarseness. Basically, everything in this physical world. Shehu zelu umazeh lu'umas nefesh halikis. That's the zelu umazeh, which says Osa Lakim, that God created parallel universes. Zeh lu'umazeh, this corresponding to that. So you have nefesh halikis in the divine. What is its parallel in the material world is the nefesh habamis, as the Alter Rebbe also explains in Taming. Sha'aseichel ha'malubish binyanim gashmim, because the seichel, the intelligence that manifests in physical matters, hu heipach mamish min ha'seichel shebenefesh halikis, is the diametric opposite of the intelligence of the divine soul, which is focused on godliness. Very different interests, very opposite interests. Shehi b'chinas chochmel yena. When it comes to nefesh halikis, you're talking about chochmel yena, supernal wisdom.
We just lost you. We just lost you on the punchline. We just lost you on the punchline. Shehi b'chinas chochmel yena.
Of course. Rabbi, the supernal wisdom.
Rabbi, you're breaking up.
You want me to stop the class? What should I do? I can't control it.
I can hear you just fine.
Okay. So we either have to live with it, or if it's completely unmanageable, we'll just stop it. What else can I do?
Well, it's fine. I mean, just if it starts to break up, it usually clears up. So maybe if you could just pause when we tell you that it's breaking up, that would be helpful.
I'm going over it. You'll be able to pick it up. Okay, so what is Chachmel Yena, the Chachma, the supernal wisdom of the divine? He's adding now another point, because we know when we talk about godliness, it's different than intelligence, human intelligence of the material world. It's Chakim, he's wise, but not with a knowable wisdom, which means it's a very sublime, a very abstract wisdom, because the wisdom is really not just about intelligence, it's about appreciating a reality greater than our own. So you're just adding that point, that it's not just two chacham, it's not like learning mathematics and physics. This one's learning about the material world, and this one's learning about God. There's actually a qualitative difference. Chakim v'lei b'chachmi yediyah is the chachma of the nefesh halikis. L'mayla min haseichel hamuskel u'musik begashmis, which is higher than intelligence, which is conceived and understood begashmis, because gashmis is understanding about ourselves, about our existence, about the empirical world around us. That's what Seichel Gashmi is, including science and so on. Seichel Aliki is learning about something outside of ourselves, beyond ourselves. So that's what the Nefesh Alikis is Esikin. So there you have diametric opposites. So again, it's not just two different types of intelligence, two different qualitatively focused very differently. One is focused on getting out of the yesh into ayin in the language that we'll learn soon and we have learned. And the other is more understanding the yesh. And then he continues and says further. Well, let me stop here for a moment if anybody wants to ask anything. As I said, this should all be pretty familiar material because we learned this in Ayin Beis. So it's only confirming what we learned, except we're learning it now in the context to understand, as I said, the themes that Ayin Beis did not fully complete. So he says like this.
I have a question. What is, I understand that this idea of supernal wisdom, and it's not chachma that is sort of something we understand, some knowledge that we can grasp in our commonplace material perspective. But he says bechinas chachma elyona, which I understand is higher supernal wisdom, and then he says bechinas chakim. So how does chakim differ from chachma elyona? I don't understand that. Like you get it, but you don't get it. It's like there's a spark. You can't be comprehended. What exactly? Why? Or is he saying the same thing twice? I mean, it seems like that he must be trying to say something here.
As I explained many times, God is beyond wisdom, but then he manifested godliness, transcendence into wisdom. So the difference is when you understand science, you're learning about the yesh, about existence. When you're using the Nefesh Halikis is a bridge, its understanding is coming to understand something that which is beyond understanding, which is godliness, transcendence. That means Chakim v'lei b'chachmi yediyah. There's wisdom, but it's not the knowable wisdom as it's usually seen in context of knowable as humanly knowable. Not defined in quite that way.
I see. Thank you.
L'mayla min haseichel hamuskel u'muskel begashmis. And now, the seichel hamuskel u'muskel begashmis, al pi seichel anushi, you're going back now to the animal soul's intelligence. That the seichel that's conceived and understood in the physical, according to seichel anushi, human intelligence, hu sheker v'hepech mamish mechochmes elikus, is false and diametric opposite from the wisdom of godliness. Shehi chochmes emes, which is a chochma of the truth. Why does he call it sheker? We're not talking here about false wisdom. Somebody understands, let's say, physics, mathematics, or any other human wisdom. It's not false. It's false because it's not appreciating that the true reality is God. You can dissect and understand the anatomy of existence and never know. It's like understanding the art without even identifying the artist. So what he means, sheker, means because real emes, you want chachmas emes, what's the chachma of total truth? That is the chachma of the nefesh halikis. Now, this does not mean you can't direct and align and channel the chachma of the nefesh habamis to the nefesh halikis. That's the goal. We're going to learn it. But on its own, it can be separate. As a matter of fact, I was actually going to record today a video about this, how the academic circles in our universities have so cut up. They're supposed to be academics, supposed to be intelligent people. And yet you see many, getting caught up literally with a total lost their moral compass, because you can be brilliant in all the sciences, but you could be completely not truthful person, not have truth. In other words, you could be an expert. You could have a person who's an auto mechanic. He's a mechanic on automobiles, but he doesn't have sight of what truth in life is. Because the wisdom of science and the wisdom of academia is not about truth necessarily. It's about the truth of what you know. They know that science, but it's not about the truth of reality. And you literally see that's what he's saying here. So the seichel anushi on its own, not directed, is a sheker and hepech legamri of chochmas emes and seichel nefesh alikis. V'amidus aneldus b'seichel agashmi. Now he goes back to the midas. Remember, there's also the midas of the nefesh habamis, and the midas, the emotions that are born from such a seichel. What will be the emotions? What kind of subjective interests and impulses will be born out of an animal soul that's busy with understanding gashmis and not the truth of God, not the truth of transcendent truth? What kind of midas will it be? That's what will be called the Yetzer Hara. Because what will you follow? You'll follow your desires. If your wisdom is about you and about existence, not about that which is beyond you, which leads to bittul, it leads to become more of a yesh, and your impulses and emotions will follow that, the Yetzer Hara. Which means your own desires. So it's the seichel of the nefesh alikis, because it's a seichel about something beyond us. You're not consumed with yourself. You're going to something more transcendent, more real than you are. So therefore, it leads to midas of refined midas. And when it comes to the nefesh habam, it's the exact opposite. So what's the eitzah? So what's the goal? Obviously, we don't want her to stay there. So here the Alter Rebbe says, "V'tzarich Odom, v'tzarich ha'odom, likafyelon." A person needs to refrain himself from the word iskafya, refrain, restrain. From koife. Iskafya comes from the word koife satzme. You have to impose upon yourself, to control yourself. Shelo yisnag al pi midas shenelda min haseichel hagashmi. That he shouldn't follow and he shouldn't behave according to the midas that are derived from and born from the seichel hagashmi. The seichel hagashmi tells you to pursue more materialism, to pursue more pleasure, to pursue whatever it is interested in for its own needs and its own desires and temptations and pleasures. The person has to now impose and not allow that to affect him. Rak, and here's where the mitzvah comes that he began the paragraph with. Now we understand the power of this mitzvah. The mitzvah is saying, instead of following your own ahava, love of this material world, v'haftas Hashem lekecha with all your heart, both parts of your heart. That also the Yetzer Hara, levavcha, shnei yetzerecha, also that is coming from the midas of the Yetzer Hara, of the Nefesh Habam, is coming from the seichel of the Nefesh Habam, should love God, should be directed toward loving God instead of loving itself and the material world. Hainu, this means Behigbir koyach nefesh alikis hamaskeles umizbeina be'ed ein sof b'posuk rishon de krishma Shema Yisrael. How is this done? By the power of the divine soul, hamaskeles, that's contemplating, and on Eid Ein Sof, that's conceiving and contemplating on Eid Ein Sof, in the first pasuk of Krishma, when it overpowers the animal soul. That's what it says, behigbir, that we intensify and we overpower.
Behagbir.
Behagbir. Behagbir, I thought behigbir. Okay, behagbir. the power of the Nefesh Elokis overpowers and dominates with its conceiving and contemplating on Shema Yisrael, the first pasuk that comes before Vahafta. That in turn is the way you subdue and control the animal soul's desire, and ultimately leading it to Vahafta. So you see clearly the idea that we learned in Ayin Beis on page 1466. He says, so how do you deal with an animal soul's interest? How do you turn it to loving God? He says you're going to need a contemplation. That's why you need the contemplation of Shema, the Nefesh Elokis in Shema. So what we learned here is actually the same thing we've learned so far in Ayin Beis. The only thing Ayin Beis never came back to how the Shema helps us get back to the animal soul. And here we will learn how it does that. Okay. So now he's going to speak about Shema. So what we learned in Ayin Beis from page 1466 till 1477, essentially 11 pages, we're now going to learn how it's originally stated in the Alter Rebbe's Maimer, which is going to be more like 15 lines or more, maybe let's say 20 lines, 25 lines, from here till the end of the next paragraph on the next page. The Mitzvah Rebbe speaks about it pages upon pages in the Rebbe Rashab's Ayin Beis. But what we're going to learn now is essentially the core source of the ideas we learned about how Yichud, understanding the Yichud Ilah, Yichud Tatod, understanding Shema. He's starting with Shema. Then he's going to mention Baruch Shem. That in turn allows the power, the Nefesh Elokis to overpower and ultimately subdue and harness and redirect the animal soul to love God, which is the question that he asked on top. Eich yishuv hayetzer hara la'avas havaya. Eich yishuv as hayetzer hara.
I can't hear anything you're saying.
Okay. Now, can everybody hear me? Or not?
We lost you for 10 seconds.
I can hear you. I'm going to have to jump off, but I'm able to hear you, Rabbi. Everybody
Okay.
have a good.
Be well. Okay.
Sometimes it's work if you leave meeting and then come back. It's restored.
I don't know if it's going to help right now. Right now it's working. Everybody hearing me?
Yeah, it's back. It's back.
Yes, good.
Okay. So now he goes into the Hizbonenus. What is the Hizbonenus? She says like this: Shema. The first word, Shema Yisrael, Shema Loshen Havana. Shema means listen, but it also comes from the word to understand. Loshen Havana. Shema is Loshen Havana, to understand. That what? Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. What are we understanding? Ki Havaya hu Elokeinu. That Havaya is Elokeinu. Pirush, Elokeinu refers to who inyan haisavos b'chinas mamala kalam and v'sevav kalam. I'm sorry, I didn't read that right. Elokeinu inyan haisavos b'chinas mamala kalam. Elokeinu refers to the creation of mamala, the level of mamala kalam and the divine that manifests within existence. So again, you should be familiar with this. We learned this in the last. All these pages, Mamala Kalam. The Sevav Kalalmin is a higher level, transcendent level. Hu Nimshech Mibchinas Havaya. That comes from Havaya, which is higher than Elokeinu. Hoya, Hoyve V'yiyah. So Havaya is sometimes explained that it's a combination of three things. Hoya, he was. Hoyve, he is. V'yiyah, he will be. basically, we're not referring to the divine that manifests in time and space of past, present, and future. It combines past, present, and future. It's referring to the infinite divine light, which is a level of ayin, not yesh. Not the ayin, not mamal kalam, the divine within existence, the divine beyond. And the creation of the yesh is mamish from ayin. So when you say Havayahu Elokeinu, is joining these two divine states, the divine within existence and divine beyond, as you'll soon explain. Visavazu, and this creation of the yesh ma'ayin, nimshach tamid yesh ma'ayin, is a perpetual process. U'kamaimer, like we say, as nimshach tamid yesh ma'ayin, kamaimer, like the statement, u'betuve mechadish b'chol yem tamid ma'aseh bereshis, that you're constantly renewing tamid, b'chol yem tamid, constantly the creation. So it's a constant process. And that's the meaning of the last two words of the Shema, V'hu Havaya Echad. And that's Havaya Echad. So Havayu Elokeinu, that they are connected, and Havaya Echad, Atuhu Koidem Shenivrei Olam, V'Atuhu Mishenivrei Olam, which we also learned in Ayin Beis, that you are before the world was created, and you are the one after the world. So from our perspective, there's a distinction. But the truth is, Havaya Echad, God is one in all stages, the same oneness. Because creation of the worlds did not have any impact and change within him. Because you cannot compare God's creation, God's actions. I move to the next page, 38c. And this again we learned in Ayin Beis, page 1467. Shemaisa enesh, human actions, there the human being has to invest, the producer has to invest his energy, mamish, within the product. Like, for example, when he builds something, he shapes something, builds something. He has to direct himself, he has to focus on it. Directs himself, and he has to invest and concentrate his mind in the thing that he's creating. When you're busy building something, you can't be doing something else. And you are absolutely, it's impacting you because you have to invest in it. It takes your energy, it takes your time. It can deplete your energy. And that's why the thing that he's creating causes a change in the power, in the mind of the person who's doing it, because he's investing in his mind, is focused on it. But Lamaila by Hashem, creation of the world, from Erein Seh Baruch Hu, Ein Poelim by Shum Shinei Chas v'Shalom, does not affect any, God forbid, any change in him. V'Hashem Echad K'mo Shenivrei Olam, and though he created the world, he remains immutable, unchangeable, even though he created the world, which is not possible by a human being that way. And now he goes to the next verse after Shema. Lefi shebaruch shem kved malchusei le'elam v'od, because blessed is your name. Kved malchusei shekol esav elam kiyuman v'chayusun ein elam b'chinas malchusei is baruch. Kved malchusei. Because the whole creation is only a reflection, only malchusei is baruch. Shebameh shu melech aleim b'chayim mahava esam. Dainu b'chinas shmoi is baruch bulvad. It's only his name, it's only his reflection that is involved in being a king over them, ruling them, and energizing them and creating them. Again, like we learned in Ayin Beis at length. So it's only a reflection. When it's yesh meaning when we create something, we're invested in it. It's not just a reflection that doesn't impact us. Our very energy is invested, and our mind and so on, in the creation. With Hashem, He's not affected by it, and all of creation is happening only in a reflective level, only in a reflection of the earth. So far I said a few things. Havayu Elokeinu, that the divine within existence is one with the divine beyond. Havaya Echad, and He is one. Nothing changes within Him. There's no shinui. Though He can and creates on the ongoing time, and that's Hashem Echad. And Baruch Shem, it's all coming only from a reflection. So you see how concentrated, how short that Alter Rebbe says it, and that's what's unpacked by the Mittler Rebbe and the Rebbe Rashab and Ayin Beis. We learned this over several pages. Here, the Alter Rebbe just says it in a few lines.
Can you take a question?
Let me just finish the topic. V'sham shayach koyach hapel b'dvar Hashem shamayim nasu, and there you can apply in the level of Malchus, which is the divine as it comes down, which is only a reflection. There you could say koyach hapel, that you have the power of the producer benifal within the production, as we learned in Ayin Beis at length. The higher levels, you can't say God invests; he's removed. Here koyach hapel, and that's what we say b'dvar Hashem, the word of God. Heavens were created. That's the words already. God is investing the words that are applying themselves to creation. Hidvar melech shilton, the word of the king rules. Ksiv. Malchuscha malchus malchus kol elamen. That your kingship, your kingdom is the kingdom of all the worlds. Yochid che'elamim melech keneda. So Yochid Chelam, the only exclusive life of all existence, is a melech. All this is the malchus that invests itself in creation. We're going to stop here. Then he's going to say, now when a person contemplates on this and this Shema and this Baruch Shem and all these details, that is what's going to affect the animal soul to change its ways and be directed and harnessed toward loving God. That's what he's going to say next. But I'm going to stop here because of time. Let me take any questions. Yeah.
So, a question I have is, is trying to connect it, what you just read. Let's say this paragraph on this page, to what we learned in Ayin Beis, and answering the question of how to transform or redirect the Nefesh Bahamas toward
we didn't get there yet. The Rebbe, Alter Rebbe is going to get there in the next part.
I understand, but I get that. But what I'm trying to relate is that, like you're doing step by step, in understanding this. So in Ayin Beis we learned that Shem Havaya and God, just keep it simple, is the only truth. He is the only thing that is actually true, because he never changes. And what is truth? It's that which stands forever. Everything else we know changes. Everything except for God. And so is he implying, I guess my question is, that one hook to grab the chokhmah, or of the nefesh Bahamos, to grab the brain of the animal soul, is to say, you're engaged in a lie. You're not engaged in the true reality. If you want to contemplate on what is true, you must therefore contemplate on God. You can't contemplate on your taivas. You can't contemplate on how you define truth. There is only one truth. And my question is, that why the Alter Rebbe here is talking about the fact that Ein Sham Shinui, there's no Shinui, he's all there is that part of the connection to transforming or hooking the Nefesh Bahamas into redirecting it toward Elikus?
I would wait to see how the Alter Rebbe finishes the paragraph, and let's see what he says, and then we can answer that question properly. It may be, but I haven't jumped there yet. Right now, in Ayin Beis, the Rebbe Rashab never returned to the subject. The Torah Ohr does. That's why we're learning it. And the Mittler Rebbe does even more at length. So what you're saying, register what you said, keep it in mind. Let's read how the Alter Rebbe applies that, and let's see if what you just said fits.
But he did talk about an Ayin Beis, this inyan of Hashem being the
but he never went back to the
truth.
Nefesh Habamis. We're talking about applying it to the animal soul. That's the whole reason we're learning Torah Ohr, because the Rebbe Rashab never came back to it. So I want to see what the Alter Rebbe says and the Mitla. I said, hold your thought. I didn't tell you to dismiss it. I didn't say it's wrong. Hold it, and let's see what the Rabbeim say, and then we'll see if what you said is the same thing, or does it add something, or explains. It's perfectly fine.
I hear you. Yeah, and I understand that the answers will come only when the mimer's over, and even then we have to learn the Mittler Rebbe, which is 77 pages.
I said, hold your thought. Keep it in mind.
Know.
And
no.
Let's read it inside, and we'll see how it plays itself out. That's all.
No, I'm just explaining my exuberance because I'm so desperate to get that answer that I'm trying to squeeze out of every word the answer. That's all.
And I've been trained to be patient, and let's see what the Rebbe has to say, and then we can bring ourselves into it.
Okay, fair enough. Sorry for that. I got a little impatient.
No, it's fine. As I said, you could also read ahead. It's fine. It's not like. Well, you'll see the Alter Rebbe is very brief about it. The Mittler Rebbe goes at length. This is exactly why we're learning these Maimarim, because they spell out what the Rebbe Rashab never got back to. Like, it would, of course, been beautiful to see how the Rebbe Rashab would have taken the whole Shema and Baruch Shem and all the concept of no shinui and so on. But let's put it this way. The contemplation definitely is meant to affect the animal soul. So we're definitely going in that direction. The exact explanation, I think, has several points to it. One of them may very well be what you just said, but keep it, hold it.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
If you're saying that you need to deal with your animal soul today, you can't wait till we learn it. So then I would say to you, use your contemplation and tell your animal soul, you're not living in a world of MS. Look how you lose your moral compass if you just go with your own selfish seichel. And you need God in your life if you want truth and you want to live up to your true potential. So what you said definitely can be used as a contemplation in Shema today, if you like. So you don't have to wait till we learn it inside. So as far as Avodah goes, by all means, use your explanation. I would definitely tell you it's good.
Thank you.
Okay?
Yeah, please, Eliezer.
Yeah, when the Rebbe said earlier today, "Ki nefesh alakis ikra, he nefesh maskelis b'menenes tamim maseges or Ein Sof Baruch Hu." So my question to you is, when in Chassidus, when he says, "Let's make a dir b'taktonim," or in the world merging the interface of Hashem, Yesh Shemiti, and Yesh Nivra, and when the famous sikh of do everything you can do, and maybe there'll be three people that know what to do and how to do and strategize on how to basically make a dir b'taktonim. Is that haskala of how the interface that we're talking about of making a dir b'taktonim? Is that coming from here? It says that this nefesh alakis is Kamid only involved in Orient, so thinking about godliness. And so my question to you is that ability to understand how to accomplish the interface, which would obviously require knowledge of both Orient Self, Orient Self, as well as Olam Gashmi to do that internet. Is that coming from the Nefesh Meskelis Shala Nefesh Bahamis? That ability to do the interface, to make a dir b'taktonim, or from the nefesh hamaskelis of the nefesh alokis, or both?
Well, nefesh habamis on its own would never know what direction to go because it's busy with its own business. So that's why, imagine a person only with a yetzer hara and no yetzer tov. It may have potential, But like the yesh itself has plenty of potential. But think of a student doesn't have a teacher. It's like without a guide. Esav without Yaakov. So ultimately, the animal soul will feed the oil and be fuel, but it needs a wick to direct it. And in many ways, the animal soul actually teaches the divine soul things the divine soul doesn't even have on its own because of the world it comes from the concealment. But for all practical purposes, the process right now is the Nefesh Elikis guiding and harnessing the animal soul and teaching the animal soul how to use its seichel the proper way. There's nothing wrong with seichel of Elam Hazeh if you know that it's a means to an end.
But
I think this is a tremendous. When I see again what's happening in the academic circles, to me it's like this is the heart of it. Even though this is a far more sublime, and they're just plain anti-Semites and saying things that are just completely horrendous. But the root of it, how can you be a person with seichel and completely lose your moral compass? To me, it's a great demonstration of a seichel nefesh habamis that doesn't have guidance. It's like doctors it's like the Nazi doctors who use their medical knowledge to experiment on little children. Sorry, go ahead.
So it comes out that the Nefesh Elokis, the has to also have, well, it says ikra, the ikra of it is thinking about godliness. It also has to have an aspect of how it relates and understands the olam hazeh gashmi chumiyas of the world too.
We're not there yet. That's another discussion. Right now, we're just beginning the process of moving from Nefesh Elokis. We're not talking about how the Nefesh Elokis understands the Nefesh Habamis. We'll get there. That's not this.
Not yet there.
Step by step. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, listen, when the Nefesh Elokis gives an example that the Nefesh Habamis can understand, that's part of the process.
So that's probably why he said only the ikr, but it doesn't mean.
He didn't mean that. Ikr
exclusive.
meant that the ikr of the Nefesh Elokis is seichel, not the ikr is in contrast to Nefesh Habamis. The ikr that he meant here is that ikr is seichel more than midas.
Oh, I thought it was talking about the contemplation on Or Ein Sof.
Not sure what line you mean then. I'm not sure what line you're referring to.
It's like 7 lines down from Havi Mashal Zemnisha. Where he says
no, there he means the ikr is nefesh. The ikr nefesh seichel. The ikr of the nefesh is seichel, both in the nefesh elokis, because that's the driving force of a nefesh. What makes a human being unique is his intelligence. Ki nefesh elokis ikr nefesh hamaskelos is benes tamid. Ve'en la'askola acheres. I think ikr here means not that it doesn't have that also has a scholar of the world. I think he means ikra that the primary force of nefesh elokis is the seichel, not the midas. That's what I think he means.
So, but Haskala Acheres doesn't have any other Haskala.
You take the nefesh elokis on its own, is not interested in anything but God. It's not interested in reading a newspaper. It's not interested in this material world. It's purely divine. It's a divine entity.
And that's my question, because it would also seem that it would need to have some understanding of all.
Not necessarily. It could understand the nefesh. It can explain to the nefesh habamis godliness in language that the nefesh habamis can appreciate. Because remember, it is seichel, but it's seichel eliki. You could explain godly seichel to a materialistic person. That doesn't mean that Nefesh Elokis has to understand materialism necessarily.
So when the Rebbe said, for example, there should be know what to do and how to do that, strategizing of how to actually create a Dira B'Takton in this world is coming from the actual ability to do that is the seichel of Nefesh Bahamas, not from the Nefesh Elokis.
I don't know. I didn't say that. Who said that? Well, not necessarily.
No, because if it says that it's only involved in godliness, godly or Ein Sof, its ability to how to transform the government and the economy and our schools.
What do you mean? I understand. a tzaddik gomer who only has thoughts about God goes to a doctor, he goes to an expert to tell him what the medical things to do. Who says that he has to be the doctor?
Okay, that's what I'm asking. So in that analogy, the doctor knowing what to do and how to actually treat the patient. So
I don't know.
speak,
I would not say that. No. Maybe you need the Nefesh Elikis to tell you what to do because it knows the message most.
Mhm.
And Nefesh Abam and the strategies are only the methods to use. I'm not sure why you're trying to force this into that. I don't see why you have to do that. To me, that's very straightforward. It's like you have a message called Mashiach. The Rebbe is saying, consult with the experts or strategize yourself of what's the best way to communicate the message. I mean, this is what I do for a living. So I take Siddur, and I try to apply it the best way to life. That doesn't mean that I have to, you have to understand your customer. You have to understand who you're speaking to. So I'm not sure what here he's talking about how the divine soul will get an animal soul to love God. So you're asking me if the divine soul has to understand the world, worldly matters?
Yes.
We'll talk about it. I don't know. He doesn't discuss that here. That's outside of the scope of the Rebbe, of the Alter Rebbe right now.
Okay, because that's what I was
It's
trying
a
to
good
understand.
discussion, but like many times, it's not what he's discussing right now. Now he's just talking about. I would finish and see how the Rebbe Rashav, how the Alter Rebbe explains this idea itself of how we didn't even finish what he said. So this question to me is premature. I would ask this question after he finishes. Let's see if we have it all worked out or we need more explanation of how this process has to happen. That's what I would say right now.
Okay. Well, you see, okay, I was focused on that, just those two lines there, that it doesn't have any Ein la haskala acheres. It doesn't have any other haskala. Okay.
That's correct.
Well, wait.
That's correct.
So okay, so that's what I was trying to understand.
Let me ask you: a divine soul in Gan Eden has other haskala except godliness?
I'd assume not.
So when it comes down, why it doesn't change? It just has to engage with an animal soul. So smart Nefesh Elikis will figure out how to engage. The question is how much engagement we'll talk about.
Okay. All right.
And there may be many levels. There are people, for example, that are great. You can go talk to them, chassidus, and they know nothing about this world. And there are others that are very knowledgeable in the world. So maybe there are different levels of how the Nefesh Elikis engages. Some are ma'ila lamaila, in between. You know what I'm saying? People, for example, or college educated graduates, and they are chassidim. They maybe can use what they know from science and from worldly knowledge to help understand chassidus in a way that a person who never who never got a degree, can't fully explain. For example, right?
Yes.
So we'll get there. We'll talk about it.
Okay.
Okay, we'll stop here. So we're up to 38c rather in Torah Ohr, and we'll stop here.